Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of the On Deck podcast. I'll be your host, Roberto Pagliaro, and today's a special day. Our first guest on the podcast, he is a two-time Seneca Baseball MVP, a 2021 OCAA bronze medalist, Seneca's all-time leader in hits at 73, and just outside the top 10 of all time in the OCAA. I had the pleasure of sharing the field with him for 4 years as my captain, AJ Rowe. Welcome to the On Deck podcast.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. How are you, big dog?
Good man, good man. I'm feeling good. Got a big rec basketball game today, so
Oh,
getting
is it?
ready
I
for
think it's
that.
your finals, right? Or
It is the finals, playing for gold. So won by like 25 in the semis. So my
eh,
baseball career looks like I'm a better basketball player. So
oh, oh, that's perfect. Two sport athlete, two-way player. It's a perfect intro into our first topic here. I'm not sure if I think you're pretty into it on Twitter, seeing what's going around the world. But
for
did
sure.
you hear the Travis Hunter and Ohtani comments over the weekend?
I did, and it was kind of just like out of nowhere. I never really thought of equating the two between like the whole two-way thing, obviously. I'm sure you'll talk about. Was definitely wild to see, and it's really divided, like just in terms of like the fan bases, how everyone feels about it.
Yeah, no, I was actually quite surprised because I was scrolling through the comments and yeah, it was honestly really divided and it honestly made me think about it. I'm not too familiar about, the football side of things, but honestly just speaking from the baseball side and being, a decent two-way player at times, I can say that I gotta it may be a little biased, but I gotta give it to baseball.
I'm kind of on that side. I'm a big football fan. I think the main thing is like in terms of the physical capabilities, baseball for pitching and hitting is so different. Like there isn't many things that carry over. But
Oh
like
yeah, 100%.
for football, like as a cornerback, there's a lot of things that you use as a wide receiver as well. So I think on that side, like pitching and hitting is way harder to do. I mean, Otani's really the only person we've seen it do recently, like above A ball, and then guys like Bryce Eldridge did in high school and things like that.
Yeah.
But the one thing is in football, like it's just so many snaps. Like you're constantly playing, you're getting hit a lot. I think that's why maybe I might be on the side of Travis Hunter. I kind of see where he's coming from, where it's like in terms of like I think you could do both talents. Like if one day you could play receiver and then the next day you could play cornerback, but I don't know about doing it in the same game because you're just getting hit all the time.
Yeah, that was kind of the thing that made me think a little deeper into it through the basic football knowledge that I have, is that you're getting hit on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
That's like, and I can only imagine that how much energy that really takes out of you, like just being hit constantly.
Yeah, yeah, and you're kind of having to run full speed. Like the thing is for Ohtani, as much as like doing both at the same time is so incredibly difficult, not taking anything away from that by any means. It's like, he'll go and he'll pitch a few innings and then he gets to sit down after each half inning. And then
Yeah.
maybe he'll have an at bat. So there's like that rest time. While for football, if you're a two-way player, that means you're playing the entire game straight on
Yeah,
one side of the ball, and he'd maybe even be doing returning. So
it's got to be honestly a lot on the body. And honestly,
yeah.
I couldn't even wrap my mind around doing that because
Yeah, yeah. So I
I
think
like
like
I like being in shape a little bit, not having I like a little break every now and then.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Like even like as like when I started pitching like just recently, there would be times where I usually hit top of the lineup. So I'd come out after my at bat and then instantly have to go into pitch and I'd be, yo, I'm gassed. Like I
Yeah,
couldn't
no.
imagine having to go out. Imagine you get a pick, right? And you take it down to the 15 or whatever, and then all of a sudden you have to go play wide receiver now.
Yeah, so
It's
I
just
gotta
crazy to
line it
me.
up, different position now.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, right? Totally something totally different, and you don't have time to even breathe.
Yeah, no, it's a lot to take in, but
For sure.
I did want to get your opinion on Otani a little bit. Do
Mhm.
you think with him coming back now, do you think he's going to be as successful on the mound as he was in years past, or do you think he takes a little bit of a step back?
Think he takes a slight step back. After two TJs, there's a lot of studies that show sometimes like lower velocity ticks and especially breaking ball command. And for Ohtani, as much as he had a great fastball, that sweeper was so elite, and he had just added along with the splitter. And he already was he always had good command. Like obviously we know that, but it was never elite level command. So I think he's the kind of guy where if the stuff takes back, like he should be perfectly fine. He has elite level pitches and a lot of them. But the problem is if his command falls off, I think you could see him be more of a mid-rotation starter. And there's a lot of talks about him potentially pitching out of the bullpen, but I just don't really see how that could work. Like being a DH and going out of the bullpen. It happened that one time in the WBC, obviously, but outside of that, I just really don't know. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think with how the Dodgers rotation is like panning out, I think they will do like an abbreviated six man and
Hmm.
kind of give Ohtani more elongated rest in between starts. So I think that might be like a slight benefit to him, especially coming off the two TJs.
For
But like you
sure.
said, I think with his off-speed stuff, with it being, it could take a slight tick back. I still think he's going to be like a mid threes kind of guy. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
thing that you're going to have to watch with him is the amount of innings that he pitches.
Yeah, that's a
And
big thing.
with how the Dodgers bullpen is, you can realistically throw him out for five, maybe push on the 6 innings, depending on pitch count, and be totally fine. Giving it to that bullpen, which is absolutely loaded.
Yeah, like that bullpen's just so good. And back on the like stuff and location, like just looking through it, his stuff plus is a 115. I mean, it's 2023. He already pitched a 118 the year before. That's so good for a starter. So I'm not necessarily worried about that. Even if it takes, a 5, 10 point off, he'd still have far above average stuff. But the location plus is a 94 for his career. So if that falls off a little bit, you're now kind of looking at, I don't know, maybe a starter more in like the Joe Boyle type where it's like elite level stuff, but can he really throw enough strikes? And I'm a little worried about that, but I mean, it's Ohtani. I'm sure he'll figure it out.
Yeah, 100% he'll figure it out. But like you said, that location plus, like going back to when he was starting back in 2022, 2023, a lot of his pitches, I will say, weren't great on location. Like his sweeper, obviously, that's just like his out pitch. Same with the
Yeah,
splitter, but that fastball command, it was just because it was elite level 99, 100, even
yeah,
touching 101, 102 at times.
yeah,
It seemed to be in the heart of the plate every single time.
yeah, yeah,
And there's only so much you can get away with velocity, and especially with how much velocity is taken over the game today. I think guys are a little more adjusted to it. So you could see that fastball getting hit a lot more, and with the slight downtick in his off speed location, you
for
could see
sure.
him get hit around. But like you said, it's Ohtani. I'm sure they'll figure it out. And that pitching lab in LA is ridiculous. So
Yeah,
they'll
and
piece
right,
it together.
he went from one of the worst teams in the league in terms of developing pitching to probably the best. And it's a guy who he had never thrown a sinker through his first couple of years, and then all of a sudden he added a sinker, and it was one of the highest graded by Stuff Plus, 123 in 2022. Even if it falls off a bit, like the stuff will be fine. It's really just location. And the fastball command already isn't great. Looking back at his 2023 year, he didn't have a single pitch that he had above average location for. And I found with starters that you kind of want to have command of a fastball and one breaking ball, and he doesn't really have any of those. His closest is his slider at a 96. And I don't know. We'll see though. I think he figured it out.
Yeah, I 100% think he figured it out. But moving to another pitcher, and this guy was elite last year, even though technically this was his first season, but he's adding two more pitches. It's Paul Skenes adding a cutter and a two-seamer to the repertoire. What do you think about that?
I'm never gonna say no to adding extra pitches. And who am I going to tell Paul Skeens who? The thing with Skeens is the Arsenal's already so refined.
Oh,
Like it was a 110
absolutely.
location plus. Like he had command of every pitch and it was already elite stuff too. We don't really see that. So usually with young pitchers, I would kind of be, maybe you could look more perfecting stuff, but for your every pitch he has is great. And the addition of a cutter, I think, is something that could be extremely interesting. And the sinker as well. The fastball already kind of has ride, so I think I'm a bit less excited about that. Not that I'm not excited. Having something that has a little bit of drop off the fastball is great. And we saw a lot of success years before with guys with three fastballs, especially in the playoffs. Merrill Kelly's the first guy that came to mind when he was with the Diamondbacks. Just with those three fastballs, because guys love sitting fastballs, and if it's high, let it fly. If it's low, let it go. It's obviously approach we hear all the time, and the ability to run a cutter in on the hands of a lefty is just like it's scary to think about, especially when you have to think about 102 coming at you as well.
Yeah, that was the first thing that came to mind was those lefties and the cutter in on the hands. It just screams weak contact to me. And I was just scrolling on TikTok and a breakdown that Trevor May had with him adding that cutter, especially getting in on lefties. It was only I'd say the only quote unquote weakness that he had was
Yeah,
being able to get those lefties out.
yeah.
And if you can get a lefty out on that cutter on the hands on the second, third pitch, that just helps you get deeper and deeper into games. And I think Paul Skenes, you call me crazy, but I think he gets to 180 innings this year.
I don't think you're crazy for saying that. I don't think that there's a worry for him in terms of durability now. There's never a worry until there is, right? Like, I
Yeah,
mean, with injuries, everyone's like, "Oh, this is going to be the guy that's going to be healthy." Ultimately, throwing that hard isn't great, but I think I would let him. I don't see a point in not. He has the stuff to do it. It's not like you have to worry about him falling off later in the games. He throws hard, and even if the fastball velo somehow, because obviously when he first came up, he was averaging over 100 on his fastball that dropped off a little bit. Not that it wasn't a elite fastball, still sitting 97, but down from 101. But
yeah,
the
crazy.
addition of that cutter and the sinker, just kind of moving it off of that, it could be so good. And you obviously mentioned his stuff against lefties. Something that was impressive to me is that his WOBA against lefties was actually lower. Um, he had more walks against lefties is the one thing, and I think that's mainly due he was trying to use the off speeds heavier.
Yeah.
The fastball kind of has more ride, so it's not necessarily something that maybe plays as well to lefties. But yeah, it's scary to think that a guy who I think arguably has the best stuff we've ever seen, just in terms of every pitch that moves every direction with fantastic command too. Have we? I don't know if we've ever seen that. That he's adding even more to that arsenal.
Yeah, no, I think at this point it's basically the Cy Young is his to lose because
Yeah.
what who realistically has better stuff and honestly wants to pitch deep into games. I remember watching, I think it was a start against the Cubs. He got pulled in the seventh, and like just watching his face walk off the mound, it's like, damn, like I
Yeah,
like
he
he
wants to be
he
out there.
wants to be on that mound pitching
Yeah.
as long as he possibly can.
Yeah, it's honestly, and I give him credit for that. Like, you don't necessarily always see that with guys, they know they're five and dive. He wants to be out there. He's a competitor, and you saw it at LSU, man. Like,
Yeah,
him
he's
throwing that, I think
unbelievable.
it was what, 125 pitches or something that he threw in that playoff game for
Yeah, that
LSU.
the
Like,
CG was insane bad.
yeah, the dude is a freak. And I mean, the projections agree with us. Like he's projected for 3.7 WAR and only 155 innings. If we project that out to 180 innings, you're like realistically the only guy who I could maybe see giving him a run for it is Corbin Burns. Other than that, like obviously, you got guys like Wheeler and Webb in front of him, but those guys are more of I feel like innings eating kind of
Yeah,
guys.
they're
I see
more inning
Skenes
eaters
yeah,
than
I
my
see
guys.
Skeens as he can pitch those innings, and I think that this year, now that he's got a decent base to go off of from last year, they're gonna let him go. And I don't think the Pirates are gonna be as bad as people think because that pitching staff is so good. If it's late in the season and they're in it, they'll let him go the 8 innings.
Oh yeah, I agreed, but yeah, for sure, I see him pitching those projections, 150 innings. I think that's a little too generous. Like I said, I think he goes. You see him get into 180, kind
Yeah.
of. I see him kind of falling into that Sandy Alcantara kind of mold of him just
Hmm.
eating innings and still having that elite stuff, and
Yeah. Yeah.
hopefully it turns into a Cy Young.
And with how deep how good the stuff is, even if obviously a lot of times we found that location plus is the first thing to fall off before stuff. But even with that, his command is also so good that even if the stuff drops down a little bit late in games, he's still going to be getting guys out consistently. And you don't have to worry about him running his pitch count up because now he has a cutter and a sinker that he can use for weak contact instead of having to depend on swing and miss.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, now with that, I kind of want to transition into a little bit more about you. I know we've had a lot of numerous discussions on the bench or on the bus about just baseball, but I never really got to know like AJ before Seneca. So
Yeah.
when did you really start playing baseball and kind of what was the age where you're like, hey, you know what? I think I can, I think I'm pretty good at this sport. When did you take it a little more seriously?
It's a question where I personally, as a kid, loved it from the time I was born, and my dad was a big baseball guy too. So there was always a
Okay.
baseball bat nearby, always a ball nearby, and that was what I loved to do. But obviously, when you're playing t-ball, I think my dad said that he could. That was around the time where he could see, okay, maybe it's something that it could be serious about because while the kids were picking dandelions and kicking dirt. I was totally locked in and paying attention to the scenarios and just learning things about the game. And I just loved watching it. I think the time when I started to take it super serious, though, was my first year of rep. I
Okay.
was pretty good as a young kid. I was what, 6, 7? I was late birthday, so I would have been 6 at that point. I like to think that I was good, and I really took it seriously because some kids would get slightly better, and I never liked people being better than me. So I guess
Oh
to
yeah,
answer
it's
your
a
question the short way, because I talk a lot, is probably around 6 or 7 I started to take it serious, but I really loved it my whole life. And then when I finally think I went to a states tournament when I was, I don't know, 15, 16 and put up some good numbers, led my team and exit velo and all that. And all of a sudden, I went from this kind of short, chubby kid to this 6 foot whatever bigger guy, and all of a sudden schools were interested. So
yeah, I can definitely tell from I mean you're the ultimate competitor out there, both on the mound and in the plate. So when you said you saw it at 6, you know what, I believe you. I believe it. So with you saying that your dad was a coach, I just want to see what are some of the things that you've noticed, or maybe even that you've noticed on your dad's team, some of the things in the youth level or baseball or even college level or MLB that you've
Mhm.
that you've seen change over the years.
Man, it's crazy because I think, being born in 2003, there's just so much that, like, I think it was the beginning of when I started to get older where the new analytics thing came up and we learned about how important stuff was and usage of pitches outside of just command, stuff like that. I feel like I saw the game switch from, in when I was younger, guys like David Percy and Jesse Litch paying for the Blue Jays, as much as I love them,
Yeah.
to seeing guys like Kevin Gosman and Nate Pearson, Alek Manoah come up who are, bigger stuff guys. So I really saw the game change from a older, you know, I've been around the game for so long, this is how it is kind of thing to a more analytically driven game. And I love the analytics part of it. And I think that's the biggest thing for like at the major league level. And honestly, like the youth levels, I'm going to include college in it. It's just crazy how much earlier guys are getting better now. I feel like the competition's getting stiffer and technology's getting better, and there's more coaches around. When I was a kid, outside of my dad, there really wasn't anybody giving me much input. But I see like the surroundings of my dad coaches a younger team, seeing him coach all these kids and seeing like I guess just how better they are. Like in terms of velocity, like, you can scroll down on Instagram and you'll see a random Striker Pence hitting 98 in his
Yes.
debut, Hunter Pence's kid. Like it's crazy. That's the biggest change I think I say. But I think there's a bit too much pressure on the kids. Like I don't know if I would have enjoyed it the same way if I had all these guys watching me. That didn't really happen until I was older.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with that. The whole velocity thing, it's come from I couldn't even tell you when it started to become a thing, but like you said, you can just scroll on Instagram and you'll find a random 13, 14-year-old kid touching 85 and you're like,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, like if
That's
you
not
would have
supposed to
saw that,
happen.
yeah, that's not supposed to happen. Like you would have been, I would have just sat right back down on the bench if I was facing that in the box at 13 or
Yeah.
14. Like it was insane.
Yeah, I mean, like, even like, it's not even that long ago, but back when I was 16, 17, the guys sitting 85 were like the top of the top. Those were
Oh
the
yeah.
guys that were going to be something. Now, like, with my dad's team, 85 is nothing special, which is
Yeah,
just
you're
crazy to
just
me.
it's just the run of the mill now.
It's just what it is.
Yeah, it's nuts to see how the game has changed in such a short period of time too.
Honestly, honestly, like I don't feel like I'm that old, but to think that I went from, the average starter sitting 91 to now a guy sitting 94 and it be considered a below average fastball if it doesn't have great IVB or extension or vertical attack angle is just so crazy to me.
Yeah, that's another thing too, is that the analytics, like you said, watching those early Jays guys and just them passing the eye test, but now with all the analytics we can dive into, you really take a deeper dive and you're like, that guy really shouldn't be at the major league level with these slew of analytics that are coming out nowadays.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about.
Yeah, and for those guys that never got the chances, those guys who we used to just think that a hard fastball was a good fastball, right? Mark Appel is the first guy that comes to my mind,
Yeah,
from the Phillies, where he threw really hard, but for some reason he just didn't succeed, and that was around the time where I think people started going like, okay, well, why is his 100 mile per hour fastball not as good as Bound and Francis's 92 mile per hour fastball? It's just,
yeah, and
or Bryce Miller. There's so much IVB on that. Like, why can't people hit it?
yeah, now too with pitchers, you'll see the odd guy throwing it around 90, 92 with success. Like you said, Bowden Francis had a great
Mhm.
second half, but you'll see guys throwing it in the upper 90s, getting touched up all the time, and you're like, how does
It
that
doesn't
make
make
any
sense.
sense?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Like, there's plenty of guys like that. I mean, and sometimes it's not even like just stuff. It's command, and we learn all these things where the old adage of, you got to keep your fastballs low. We're kind of learning that, well, maybe high fastballs are the way to play it, just depending on your fastball. I mean, I know growing up, I wasn't much of a pitcher until recently, but it was always, you got to keep the fastball low and, keep the breaking balls off it because it can't do damage up there. But I think we're learning that those high spin fastballs can play it better up in the zone
Yeah,
and
they play
because
a
you're giving
lot
them a
better up
chance
in the
low.
zone. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, my next question, I think it could be a little bit of a thinking one. If you were the
Mhm.
commissioner for one day, which rule would you add or change?
Okay, so off the top of my head, this might be a boring answer, but I'm adding the challenge system to Major League Baseball yesterday. I think it's the best
Really?
of both worlds. Absolutely. The thing is, as much I love the framing, as much as I love the analytics, I love old school baseball, that cat and mouse game and all that. So I don't want to fully remove that, but I just think the challenge system is perfect. It's so quick. Like there was one time I was watching through some prospects for the Jays. Peyton Williams was the guy I was watching, and they had a challenge system game going on, and I didn't even notice until after because it's so quick. And obviously in spring training they show it on screen, and it
Yeah.
takes a tiny bit longer, but it's like 15 seconds, and I think that it's perfect way of where when there's an obviously wrong call you can still get it, but we still have that little bit, for those borderline pitches, you're not going to challenge all of them. So I like that. I think that's what I would do. But to make a more like interesting answer outside the challenge system, because it's already kind of a thing, um, I would totally rework the draft lottery to a point where I think it should work that you have to spend a certain amount of money in order to qualify for the lottery.
Ooh, okay. I would not have gone there at all, but I kind of like that idea.
It's my way of I don't think a cap floor is ever coming because a cap floor comes with a ceiling, and there's no way both sides decide on a fair number. But I just think that it would make it so, as much as and not every team can be competitive necessarily. I think at least it would say that they have to put a concerted effort into it instead of having, teams like the Athletics where they're obviously tanking and they don't care, they just want to get out of there and they don't put any money towards the team. I think that that would be the way to do it, where you set a certain amount and it's like, if you spend this amount, then you can be in the lottery. And at least then, even if it's not necessarily, them going out and trying to do everything they possibly can to win, at least they're actually kind of investing in the team, giving the viewers something to watch.
Yeah, that's another thing too, is with the viewership and bringing people to the park and getting
Hmm.
people more invested in that team,
Hmm.
especially Oakland with that move to Sacramento, which
For sure.
I I hate to see it because honestly, I liked watching games at Oakland. That ballpark was just
That
so
was cool.
different in so many
Yeah,
ways.
yeah.
It's
Now
sad
they're
to
playing
see
in a
it
minor league
go.
park.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
truly
yeah.
unfortunate.
And
But
now we see them spending money.
yeah, exactly. I want to get your idea on I when I was thinking of this question, I was kind of thinking of getting rid of the three batter minimum.
Hmm.
And I thought of it as say you have, it's middle of the seventh inning and you have a lefty up. I kind of like having that cat and mouse game, like bringing it back and not
Hmm.
having that three batter minimum as like a cop out, making those, those managerial moves that will sometimes make or break a game. Uh, like getting that lefty in to face that tough lefty, but then
Hmm.
being able to have a righty warming up for the next two batters to finish the inning. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
I'm on your side. I personally, when they added it, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I've kind of warmed up to it because I think it just kind of is what it is. But I think that I don't agree with it in terms because I know what they're trying to do is just speed up the game.
Yeah,
I
no, I
think
agree with that
the
part.
Yeah, I think the happy medium would be that, if you remove a guy before the three batter minimum, that the other guy just doesn't get a warm up on the mound. Make him do all his warm up in the pen, and then once he gets on the mound, we go. And that way you could still kind of stop the downtime because it would just be like a mound visit. That's the best thing. I know obviously the players aren't gonna like that because they have their routines and such, so it might not be a possibility. But I miss the three batter minimum, and I think with the way bullpens are working now, I don't think we'd see that lefty only out guy as often anyway. So I think it could kind of add more of the chess game to it because with the way we see bullpens used, it's no longer, oh, you have your mop-up guys and you have your closer and your setup. You need six guys that can pitch leverage innings if you want to have success. So I think adding that little bit of the chess game could maybe give some teams that decide, hey, listen, we have a couple of guys who can bounce back and go every other day. So we can carry this lefty only out guy, especially for with the Yankees, where I'm like, man, watching their postseason games, really they were the most top heavy lineup in baseball. It's just
Yes.
Soto,
Yeah, I agree.
Soto and Soto and Judge. You know that as a Yankees fan. It was Soto and Judge, and Stanton too in the postseason. But I'm like, the fact that you couldn't go to a lefty for Soto and then change to a righty for Judge and Stanton, you had to pitch with the lefty. I didn't really enjoy that come playoff time. So maybe removing it come playoff time might be the happy medium.
Yeah, I honestly just want to see more managerial moves, like you said,
Yep.
bringing that chess game back and having managers like actually think about the moves that they're making and not just being, oh, this guy can you can get two of the three guys out and we'll see what happens with the with that last guy to get the last out.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it would and then those guys who can get out both sides would still be at a premium because it's saving you a spot in your bullpen. You know what I mean? So I think
Yeah.
that would be I agree. I don't think it ever will come back because they're very focused on the pace of play, but I don't think that the substitution was really what was killing baseball in terms of viewership.
No. All right, so jumping back in, with spring training being on underway and going into the season, who are either some players or some prospects that you have your eyes on this season?
I was hoping this question was going to be asked. I love looking for the next breakout. I like to think I'm good at it ish. I guessed Teoscar Hernandez's breakout the year it happened, and that's always my one up on my dad. He told me that he is what it is, and I said, no, he's got more. And I ended up being right, thank God. So I got a bunch. I don't know what we are time wise, but I did a couple of Blue Jays once because I'm a huge Jays fan. And then
Okay.
I did ones for that maybe more for the rest of the league. So which ones do you want me to start with?
Give me a couple Jays ones first.
All right, sounds good. So the first one is Alan Roden. I'm a big Roden fan, and it kind of sucks because I was on it before like he became so to say mainstream. Like in J Spring training, he's been a big person that's been talked about, and Atkins even shouted him out in his own press conference, which he never does.
Oh wow.
He doesn't like actually answering questions. but he answered this one. And I just love him because he makes an immense amount of contact. Athletically, he's better than most people would figure. Like anytime anybody tests him, he grades out great. He's solid on the base paths. I was hoping he's gonna be a center fielder. I don't think that's possible. I think he's gonna be a above average corner outfielder, but he's a guy who has a knack for the barrel, makes a lot of contact, and has a fantastic approach. I just love these guys because they're high floor big leaguers. And I think that's an underrated thing for lots of the teams because no, they're not fun. Or like everyone would rather talk about a guy like just say James Wood or Leonardo DeVries, who's an A ball, or Ethan Salas, than they would talk about a guy who, yeah, he's going to be a solid, you know, six batter and a 2.5 WAR player. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think now that you say the name Roden, I think I have heard probably when he was becoming more of a mainstream prospect, but
Mhm.
interesting that you say that. So do you think that, he makes enough of an impact or enough of a showing in spring training where he gets up on the roster for the big squad?
So I don't think he makes it at a camp just because the Jays have like an overabundance of outfielders and he's not on the 40 man currently. But I think by the middle of the season, I'm honestly I feel like George Springer is kind of going to continue to slow down and we'll see what we get from Varsho, but we don't have a DH. I think I could easily see him come in and instantly become the left fielder, which would push Santander to more of a DH role with Springer doing it every now and then. He just makes so much contact and like he was 86th percentile in all of AAA and ex-WOBA, 90th in whiff rate, 93rd in K rate, and he's fast and he can steal bases. Fantastic approach, doesn't really chase, and he consistently hits the ball hard and he changed his stance and he's been good ever since then. So I don't know if he makes it a camp. I really want him to. I think we just have too many on our roster because we still have Joey Loperfido and Addison Barger and Davis Schneider, who I didn't even mention. And Nathan Lucas. But I think that come mid-season, where I think the Jays are going to be a little desperate, I think he's the next guy up.
Interesting that you say Santander in the outfield. I always kind of pictured him as like I'd say the quote unquote fourth outfielder. I think I would rather him be at DH and have throw like a
Agreed.
Springer out there um,
Agreed.
until Varsho. I think I saw him taking swings. I think it was just a couple days ago that he's
Yeah,
back.
he hit a
But
home run today.
yeah, oh, did he?
Yeah, he's DHing. He's not ready to pitch. He's not ready to throw fully yet, but he's swinging the bat better than he's ever done it. So
Yeah, so I'd be interested to see what the Jays outfield alignment looks like because
yeah,
I mean, I think left field in the Rogers Center is a lot easier to play than,
yeah,
right field in Camden.
yeah,
So
for sure,
I think you
for
could
sure.
give him the like some run out there, but at the same time, he isn't the most fleet-footed out there. So
Not at all.
yeah, it
Not at
could it,
all.
it
Yeah,
could be
yeah.
interesting what they do out there.
Yeah, and we have the DH spot because we are allergic to signing other power bats other than Santander. So I think that moving him in and out of DH with Springer because he's 35 now, I think, would make a lot of sense and putting other guys in the corner because I mean the thing with DH is we also have Arovis Martinez, who I'm sure you've heard of,
Yes.
and Will Wagner, son of Hall of Famer Billy Wagner, obviously. He hit like 350 when he came up yesterday. So or yesterday, last year. So it's an interesting situation. I'll move on off of a Blue Jay. I have a couple other pitchers, but I'll move off of that. Jesus Sanchez for the Miami Marlins. Sure, you've heard of him.
Ooh, that's
That's my breakout pick. I've been now my problem with this one is I've been saying for the last like 2, 3 years that it was going to happen. But I finally am saying that this year's the year. Last year he put up a 107, or sorry, a 100 WRC plus after a 107 the year before. The one thing about Jesus Sanchez is he's actually an above average to average outfielder, which with a lot of guys who hit the ball as hard as he does, it's not very common. So I think that gives him the floor of if he's not hitting and he's in Miami too, there's not just that instant fall out of the league kind of potential, you know what I mean? So it's a guy who just hits the ball so incredibly hard. Like he's 95th in hard hit rate, 83rd in barrel rate, 93rd in average exit velocity. Great, and his expected stats are great. I just can't give up with him, and he's athletic. Average sprint speed, He was actually above average by outs above average last year. I'm I'm going for it because eventually he's gonna have to break out. There's just no way this profile doesn't work.
Yeah, funny you say Jesus Sanchez because I've been hearing that name, like you said, a lot the last couple of years as someone
Mhm.
that's just people are waiting for him to break out because, like you said, he hits the ball so hard, and when he
So
connects,
hard.
bro, it flies. I'm pretty sure.
Exactly.
I think he had maybe one like the top three longest home runs
Oh my
last
goodness. You remember that
season.
one a couple of years ago in Coors? I think that
Yeah,
ball went 700 feet.
it was. He has such immense power, and
Yep.
I didn't know that he grades out to just an average defender. Like you said, I would not have
Yeah.
expected that in the outfield at all.
Yeah. And like if you think about guys that have, like high level power and at least average defense, there's not really many guys in the league at all that are non-stars. Like the only guys, like when I think of like a big bopping power bat that's above average defensively, it's all the stars. It's guys like Judge and like a younger Bryce Harper. Like you just don't really get that because if they do, no, they're not going anywhere. They're going to be that star player. So maybe not star for Jesus Sanchez, because the whiff rates are still bad, but um, it's league average walk rates and it's elite level hard contact with 90th percentile bat speed. I just don't see how this guy doesn't become good enough. And his whiff rates aren't, like Joey Gallo level bad. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And he can still take a walk and he makes contact. Obviously, it's really the approach. I think if you could just tighten up that approach just that tiny bit, I think that you're looking at a very, very good player. He's in Miami though, so I don't
Yeah,
know.
that
We'll
is
see.
true. I was gonna say that might be the one of the very few bright spots in Miami the next couple years. If
Yeah,
hopefully he puts it together this year, because
yeah.
if
Because
he
outside
does,
of um,
it'll be a building piece for them in the future.
yeah, and they need that. The farm system is very iffy. They haven't really hit in the draft. They just kind of it's tough to rebuild a team when you have no pieces.
Yeah,
Just having a single guy that's good really helps when you're looking at a rebuild. That's how it started for Baltimore. So,
that's
and
how
then
the
oh, sorry, go
Marlins
ahead.
the Marlins kind of did like the quantity over quality
Hmm.
thing last year with all the prospects.
Hmm.
And yeah, like you said, there isn't that many prospects that I really like. I'm like, wow, like this guy
Yeah.
is gonna be good. It's a lot of just like, like we'll see how it goes kind of guys.
Yeah, and I don't like that philosophy in terms of trades. Now, obviously, Miami didn't have necessarily the studs to trade to go and get a real guy. I mean, the Tanner Scott was really the lone one, but I don't like the quantity over quality approach, unless it's for IFA guys, because I think that it just you end up with a bunch of quad A guys maybe, and is that really a good outcome? You
No,
can go and
not at
get
all.
those from the DFA market. So the Oakland did the same thing when they blew it up. They traded Chapman to the Jays and was Zach Logue, Kirby Snead, Gunnar Hoagland going the other way, and also Kevin Smith, and three of those guys were DFA'd.
Yeah, I
So it
was
just
gonna
doesn't
say
really
I
work out.
remember absolutely none of those guys maybe
Exactly.
even playing a game for Oakland. Maybe
Exactly.
got
There's
in
only
maybe
one guy
one
with
or
the
twice.
organization.
Yeah,
Yeah, they were all negative WAR guys. And they did the same thing with Matt Olson. Obviously they're hoping that what's it called, Langley's works out for them, but or sorry, Soderstrom. But they're kind of in that awkward scenario where they need some guys. Yeah. And the last guy I got is Joe Boyle. He
oh,
was
okay.
added from Oakland in the Jeffrey Springs trade. Boyle is nasty, like legitimately so nasty. He just struggles with having any idea where the baseball is going,
Yeah, exactly.
which is a, which is a big problem. It's important to know where the baseball is going, but he doesn't let nobody can hit him when he's in the zone, but it's a first percentile walk rate. And he was first percentile chase rate, which shouldn't happen for a guy with his level of stuff, but he didn't his pitches were so often just completely uncompetitive that they were easy to lay off of. But he's in Tampa Bay now, and he just had a spring training start. I was kind of in when I saw the trade happen, I was like, okay, I could see this happening. And he just had a spring start the other day, and he didn't throw a single pitch below like 99 and a half, I think it was, on his fastballs. And he hit and I think he averaged 100 on his fastball. And I was like, okay, like this guy's going from he was already 97, 98, right? He's 6'7", 240. He's a big dude,
Yeah.
but he's now all of a sudden throwing even harder. And for a lot of guys, I think that with guys who have that elite stuff, but iffy command, it's always like, well, can they fix the command? Can they fix the command? And Tampa does that, which is good. But I think there's also a way that you can kind of bypass having bad command if you can just get your stuff to a good enough level. And his stuff was already good. And if it ticks up more, the slider is one of the best sliders I've legitimately ever seen. It had a 160 stuff plus grading on it last year, which is insane. If he's throwing even harder, that slider's going to play even more, and he could just get to a level where he's just throwing enough strikes to be a five and dive, and Tampa loves them.
Yeah, I completely agree. When I saw that Jeffrey Springs trade go down and I saw Joe Boyle was like, I guess the quote unquote headline of that trade,
Hmm.
I immediately thought, oh, Tampa's gonna fix him. Like
Exactly.
he's gonna turn into like because I watched him pitch. He had a start against the Yankees, and one of the things that they headlined in the Yankees broadcast was no control, has no clue where it's going, but elite stuff. And I
Yes.
watched him for I think he was in there for 3 innings due to just walking guys and pitch count,
Yep.
but you can see what they mean with the elite stuff that just it needs that little bit of refinement. And
Yep.
I have the ultimate faith in the Rays organization to fix them.
Exactly. Yeah. The fact that he's with the Rays, it's one of those trades where we might look back and go, wow, Oakland traded like this guy who is like and now an elite starter. But I don't think Oakland was ever going to fix him anyway. So I think it's one of those ones where you got to kind of be happy, you cut your ties, you say thank you for what you did, but it's time to move on, and you end up with and I think that they get Jeffrey Springs, which I like for them because Jeffrey Springs is high level pitching, but Joe Boyle's so good. The only thing is he had a 17.7% walk rate last year, and that was the lowest in baseball by 3%.
Yeah, like that
Yeah,
isn't gonna
that's
play.
it can't play. It can't. It can't. It doesn't matter how good your stuff is. The next closest is Chapman, who has probably what still some of the best stuff in baseball, and he was up 14%. The gap between Boyle and Chapman is the same as the gap between Chapman and the guy in 40th place, which is Justin Martinez. So he's got to at least get it to a 13%, 12%, where it's probably more like 12, 11%, where it's still bad, but his stuff is good enough to kind of, overcome that.
Yeah, Tampa Bay is one of those places. In my opinion, I think Tampa Bay, Cleveland,
Hmm.
Dodgers, and
Hmm.
the Brewers are one of those
Yeah,
places that you can't really, you shouldn't be trading pitchers that are like, you know what, he's a work in progress.
exactly.
Because they're gonna make a couple tweaks and they're just gonna turn absolutely elite.
If I was a GM, I would go to the Rays and say, "Hey, so we want this guy. What do you want for him?" And whatever prospect they say, I would literally keep the tightest of grabs on that guy. He's not going anywhere because Tampa
Yeah,
figures
because
it out
they
all
they
the time,
exactly they see one little thing, it's like, oh, you know what, we can make this little tweak and they're gonna turn elite. But yeah,
right? And it's like I've learned to never doubt him. When they traded Willie Adames, they got it was JT Chargois or Fire Ison back along with Drew Rasmussen. I was like, they traded Willie Adames for two relievers, and all of a sudden Drew Rasmussen became an elite starter.
yeah, and honestly, watching him, he's got to be one of the most satisfying pitchers to watch in that
Oh,
organization. Him
yes,
and
man.
him and McClanahan, oh my, I
They're
those
so
are
nasty.
must-watch starts.
They're so nasty, and it looks so simple. So simple.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
definitely tuning into more McClanahan starts
Oh
this
man.
summer.
As much as I'm a Jays fan and I don't want Tampa to be good, having a good Drew Rasmussen and just a good Shane McClanahan is good for baseball. I just love watching those guys. They're
Yeah,
so good.
yeah, that whole rotation, Bradley, Boz,
Yeah.
McClanahan, Rasmussen.
Pepio,
Yeah, I can't even forget about Pepe. Like
he
those
looked
are
good last year.
five solid guys.
Yeah, and you got guys behind them too. Like that's another thing, right? Like there's so many guys in there that could be like legit good pictures. And they still have Zach Littell, who was one of the more underrated starters in baseball. 3.6 ERA last year, 160 innings. There's so many guys that even when inevitably one of them goes down with a TJ surgery, that they have other guys that can come in. So it's a deep pitching staff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And moving on to, final question. Going to talk a little bit about steroids in the Hall of Fame. And I don't think we've ever, like, even on the bench or on the bus or even at dinners, I don't think we've ever talked about this. But
I don't think we have.
do you think guys that have done PEDs should be in the Hall of Fame?
It's a it's a slippery slope. There's just like there's so much to do with all of that. I think that originally I was like totally in on steroids. I thought, yo, who cares? Like these guys are so good anyways. It doesn't guide them to it. And I think as I got older, my opinions changed slightly.
Really?
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
For me, I think so I kind of go two ways with this. I think to the era that was the steroid era, with
Mhm.
Bonds, Clemens,
Yeah.
McGuire, Sosa,
Yeah.
but more specifically, because Bonds, is the poster boy when it comes to
Yeah.
PEDs in the Hall of Fame. If you look at his career, quote unquote, before the PEDs,
Mhm.
he was still a Hall of Fame caliber player.
It's true. It's true. It's true.
But
He
then
just
as
became the best player of all time instead.
exactly. So I think like I personally think they should all get in because it was that period of baseball, and to be honest, I think everybody at some point was doing it. So it kind of was like, I guess, like an
Mhm.
even playing field.
I can agree in that sense with just the guys who like played when like if you didn't get a positive test, I think I'm on your side. But I think for guys like A-Rod is the first one that comes to mind. I don't want I think that the guys who did it when it wasn't allowed, I don't think they should be in. Like
Yeah,
I
so
know
that
you're a Yankees fan, so I don't know what your feeling is on
that
A-Rod.
that that perfectly goes into my next point, where I kind of I like disagree with those guys that, like you said, that have been caught and they know it was the wrong thing. So as
Hmm.
much as much as it pains me, like A-Rod, like he won't get in. Robinson
Yeah.
Cano should not
Oh,
get
Cano
in.
hurts me. It's such a smooth
Yeah,
swing.
oh my
I love Cano, man.
man,
I just love that swing.
it's one of the smoother swings in all of baseball. And then
And when it's
Ryan
coming from a
Braun.
Jays fan, Ryan
Yeah.
Braun, Ryan Braun,
Yeah,
Ryan Braun.
those are the three names that immediately come to mind where it's like you know what you were doing and
Yeah,
you got caught, so you should not be allowed in. But
yeah,
on the other side, it's like it was a period of baseball. Yes, we know it was wrong in hindsight looking at it
yeah,
now,
yeah.
but
But everyone was doing
yeah, exactly. So I think
it.
I think those guys should get in.
I think I'd have to agree with you. But now we get into the slippery slope where it's if we're letting in guys that we know obviously did steroids, why don't we let in A-Rod? You know what I mean? Because it's like Bonds obviously did steroids. There was a point where we can look at it and go, yes, this is when he did the steroids. For A-Rod, I don't think we like I don't think he did it his whole career, right? Like I
No,
wouldn't
I,
think
I
so.
I don't think he did it his whole career. I think it was just when that I forget what the report was actually called, but he
The
was
Mitchell report, I believe,
yeah, I
right?
think it was the Mitchell report where him and a
Hmm.
bunch of other names were on
Hmm.
it, and he
Hmm.
did end up getting suspended for the 162.
Hmm. So
So
there's the
yeah,
slippery slope now, right? Because now we're saying that Bonds should be in there because in his time, he it was okay and he did it. A-Rod before the Mitchell report already had a Hall of Fame career.
that is
You
very
know what I
true.
mean?
Yeah,
So it's kind of like the argument we make with Bonds. We can make that same argument with A-Rod, right? Like this guy by 2005 was probably already a Hall of Famer.
oh,
Maybe
easily.
that's a bit early, but around that time, that's when he was a Hall of Famer, and he definitely cemented it around 2007 when he had that almost 10 war season. I believe it was seven, maybe '08, but pretty sure it was '07, when he had that near Hall of Fame career. The guy was already a Hall of Famer. So is it really fair to say yes, Bond should be in, but A-Rod shouldn't? So maybe you just don't let them all in. I don't really know.
Yeah, you are right about that. It is a very slippery slope. But I am actually curious to see what his Hall of Fame voting percentage goes by in the next couple years because I
Mm,
think I want to say it was around 20-25% this year.
hmm
So I'm kind of curious, do we see it like I know Billy Wagner didn't do steroids, but he
hmm
slowly was
Yeah,
increasing each year.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think the same with Andrew Jones
yeah,
when he got on.
yeah,
He was a very slow increase too. So I'm
yeah.
kind of curious like if people feel more sympathetic towards that whole case because
hmm
like you said you could look at it as like two separate careers. The
hmm
same thing with Bonds like he was an amazing player before the steroids
hmm
and do we kind of just chalk it up there, or
hmm
it'll be interesting the way that whole thing plays out.
For sure. And I think the thing is, we have steroid users in the Hall of Fame. Like that's the part where it's like, if we're being honest, the main reason Bonds and Rodriguez, if Rodriguez doesn't get in, the main reason they're probably not going to make it in along with Roger Clemens is because the media doesn't really like him.
Yeah,
Like they're kind of
that's
like if
very
we're being
true.
honest here, right? Like Ortiz is in there and he failed the preliminary test, and Craig Biggio's in there, and I'm pretty sure Pudge got popped if I'm not mistaken. Same with
Yes.
Piazza, right? I'm pretty sure all these guys got popped, so they made it in there. So if we're being honest, if Bonds just wasn't who he was outside of the baseball field, I think that he might honestly just be in there just because I think that there's a little bit of controversy with just, who's voting for you. If they have a reason to say no, they're gonna say no. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it came down to the same thing with Kurt Schilling too. Like there's
Yeah. Yeah,
he people just don't like the guy at all, and it really showed in his Hall of Fame voting.
for sure. For sure. I mean, Schilling was such a good pitcher, and it's obvious that him as a human being was the reason. It was not nothing to do with the whole baseball thing that he didn't make it to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and I think the same thing. Well, it's on a way different scale, but it's the same thing with the Omar Vizquel thing, and the same thing
Yeah,
with
yeah, yeah.
Roberto Alomar.
Oh my
Just,
gosh, man, don't. And
just,
you can't say that name around a Blue
yeah,
Jays fan, eh?
just,
It's
just,
like Voldemort. You can't say that.
just not very good people. Great people
Yeah.
on the baseball field,
Yeah.
amazing
Yeah.
careers, both of them.
And I think
But
that's another question.
yeah,
Do you like should those be separated? For a guy like I think that for those guys like Omar Vizquel should not be in the Hall of Fame. I don't even think as a player he's a Hall of Famer, but
that
that's a different
I completely agree with you.
I'm happy to hear that. I don't think as a player he's a Hall of Famer. He just played for a long time. But I don't think like as a player, like in his peak, I think he had like 1 year, I want to say it was 99, where
Yeah,
he
I was
had
gonna
like a
say
solid year.
he was never a great hitter. Like I think
No, no.
his career WRC plus might have been like I want to say it's like high 80s, low
I think
90s.
so. I think you know what? I was looking at it the other day. I want to say it was around like an 87.
Yeah,
If you
like
give me a minute, I'll check it. But like he was never that great of a player. I think he had 1 year where like he popped. I want to say it was 99. It was either 99 or 2000 where he popped and he had himself a big time year. And by big time, I mean like it was like I think it was like a 110, 120 WRC plus. But it was on that team with Alomar and Ramirez,
yeah,
Lofton and Tomey too.
he was known for his glove and his
Yeah.
glove only, and
It's like,
the occasional
exactly.
stealing bases.
Exactly. And he's not Ozzie Smith. So I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, but like back to the original point, like, do you think that like that off the field stuff, not for a guy like Vizquel, but for a guy like Kurt Schilling, where he technically, he wasn't a, like a disgusting person like Vizquel is. It's more just like he's not a good person in different ways. Do you think those kind of guys should be in the Hall?
That's that's a tough one because
You know what
if
I
we're
mean? I don't
talking,
necessarily need an answer, but
yeah, I yeah, that's a tough one because it is technically the Baseball Hall of Fame,
hmm
not People/Baseball Hall of Fame. So
hmm
yeah, that's a tough one. You honestly you can go both ways with that.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the situation I'm in where I don't know if I have an opinion on it, but it's something just, kind of interesting, right? It's just like, well, maybe, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. The Hall of Fame is I feel like there's a lot in I'm a big basketball fan and a big football fan, and I don't think there's the same amount of controversy for those Hall of Fames
Oh,
as there is for
yeah,
baseball.
absolutely not. Because I think um, I forget who got inducted last year into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Um, but yeah, no, I think baseball is like widely known as one of the harder Hall of Fames to get into as a player.
Hmm. For sure, for sure. I mean, there's some guys who are in the Hall of Fame that like legitimately weren't that good of players, and they're and they're in the Hall of Fame because people like them. Like
Yeah.
it's like, or they were on a very good team, like they're on those Celtics dynasties. The Hall of Fame class last year was Billups, Carter, um, Michael Cooper, and I want to say Walter Davis. And like those guys, like none of those guys are like Vince Carter was really, really good, but none of those guys were ever MVPs or anything like that. So
No, none of those
very
guys
different.
really stand out. Like I know Walter Davis, I think he was the all-time Suns leader in points.
Mhm. He's
And
good. He's a good player.
yeah, Billups won a championship with the Detroit Pistons, but
Yeah.
none
But
of
it's a
those
guy who
guys, like you
averaged
said,
19, 3 and 3.
none of those guys
You know?
won MVPs or
No,
multiple championships. That is like
no.
you're like an automatic Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I mean, Walter Davis only made two All NBA teams and he made the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? So for 2 of the years, he was a top, you know, 15 player in basketball. And it was his first 2 years. And after that, he never did it. So,
Yeah, like you will never ever see a two-time All-Star into the Hall of Fame with that being their only accolade.
exactly. That would never happen in baseball. That would never happen in baseball. Never, never. The multi-time, like the Hall of Fame in baseball is a lot more tight, and I think that's baseball as a sport as a whole. But yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
I
mean,
don't know
and honestly, it should be hard to get into Hall of Fame because
for sure,
like you have to be the best of the best, either like
for
during your
sure,
time
for
or
sure.
over a span of your career, accumulating, hits, home
Absolutely,
runs, wins. That's
absolutely.
another thing. I don't think anybody's gonna get in for wins anymore because no one pitches deep into games.
I think it's good that we're seeing a bit of a switch in it though. But I think we're in that awkward stage where there's still some of like the more old time voters, so to say, where they're looking at wins and strikeouts. I think the next wave it'll just be, oh, what's your WAR? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like you have 70 WAR, okay, you're a Hall of Famer. You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
was gonna
Where
say
it's the
I
wins
think
and shit.
now with especially all the stuff that I've seen like on YouTube or on TikTok is
Mhm.
people really breaking it down to coming down to your war. Like
Yep,
70 is that mark where you're like, okay,
yep,
let's have a conversation about
yep,
what you I think at 70 war is where we really stop and like have a conversation about is this guy have enough to be into the hall?
for sure. Absolutely.
But
I mean,
it should be interesting to see how everything pans out with the
yeah.
hall in the coming years for sure.
Yeah. For A-Rod is really the guy to watch. If A-Rod doesn't make it in, I don't think we'll ever see another steroid guy make the Hall of Fame because as much as I dislike A-Rod, because mainly because he was a Yankee, but also because of him as as a person, that he's like at my like out of players I've seen, probably the best player I've ever seen.
Yeah, no,
Maybe
he's
Trout in his prime, but he did it for a long time. Nobody else did that. So
yeah, bitch. Will
yeah,
be I'm kind of curious how that plays out.
yeah,
But thank you, AJ. I appreciate your time today. It's honestly a great conversation. We've never really sat down to really talk baseball like this, and
yeah.
I had a great time.
Me as well. Thank you so much for having me, man. It was great.
No problem. And hey, who knows? Maybe we'll bring the boys together, have an even bigger conversation about baseball.
Sounds good to me.
All right. I appreciate you very much, AJ.
No problem. Thank you.
That concludes today's podcast. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for tuning in to today's episode. It was honestly a blast talking with AJ, just talking ball with him. We've never really had those kind of conversations on the bench, obviously, because they could go multiple ways. And just the ins and outs of baseball, it's always fun talking with somebody about that stuff. So thank you again for listening. Make sure to rate and review this on Apple Podcasts or 5 stars on Spotify or wherever you might find your podcasts. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.